But the history department was amazing, and that's something that I don't know if you were going to go in this direction or not, but one of the things that happened to Marion and me here, we weren't here a month, and all of a sudden it felt like we were here all our lives. I never felt so comfortable anywhere, and I knew, I didn't know I'd ever end up teaching here, but I knew I wanted to. But I had every intention of becoming a high school teacher. I thought that I really wanted to be a high school teacher like that lady I had back in Dalton, Pennsylvania. But this man I mentioned, Paul Nagel, he's the one that talked me out of it. He said that I should not do that. I should go to graduate school, and he got me to apply at Minnesota and Vanderbilt for some reason, those two. And I thought I was going to go to Minnesota, but the offer I got from Vanderbilt was so great that I went there, and I was always glad I did. It was a small school, and I felt very comfortable there. But Eastern, even when I was at Vanderbilt, I still felt close to Eastern. But how I started to teach, and I guess I didn't really get into that. When I came to Eastern, the summers, this campus was full of people in their middle-aged people going to school because of the minimum foundation, in which all of the non-degreed public school teachers in Kentucky were literally encouraged or maybe even forced to go to school.
The pay structure in the minimum foundation program really encouraged them to earn their degrees, earn their master's degrees, and then get into those planned 30-hour programs, certification programs beyond the masters. And for you're right, for years this place was alive in the summer as other institutions
and even
were.
Night classes, they come in for night classes. So I started taking classes here in January of '55, but I was a junior because not only did I take that 2 years plus at the University of Scranton, but when I was in the service, I took courses every time I was someplace where you could take them. And I didn't really have to get much to get a degree. I really went to school here in '55 in the spring, and in the spring and fall of '55, '56. But in '56, in the spring, Virgil Burns, who taught political science at Eastern, he allowed too many people to come into one of his Saturday classes. I mean, all the old school teachers loved him, and I don't know how many, he must have had 120 in there. And so instead of letting him teach 120, they decided to cut his class in two. And Mr. Adams, who was the chairman of the history department, asked me if I would want to teach a section of Kentucky government. And so in the spring of '56, just a year after I was out of the service, I taught one course here.
1956 was when the first African-American student, Andrew Miller, enrolled at EKU as a graduate student, and then several years after that, we had our first African-American undergraduate student, and you were quite familiar with her, I know.
She was my student secretary, Marie Ferris.
Marie Ferris.
And she was also the first African American to be integrated into Richmond High School.
Madison High School.
Madison High School.
See, I was a freshman.
Yeah.
At Madison High School in 1957.
We probably knew Marie then, did you?
So I knew her. She was a year or two ahead of me. I graduated from high school in '61. I think she might have been 60.
Yeah.
But I well remember that. And then in the early '60s, primarily through athletics, we started getting more African American students. Yeah. One of those gentlemen, Jack Jackson, who remains a very good friend of both of us to this day. I had an email from him this morning. I think you said you spoke to him last night.
On the telephone. Jack Jackson came here he was the second wave of African-American athletes to come to Eastern. The year before, I think it was in 1960 or 61, I can't remember for sure, but a football player from Ohio, from Dayton, Ohio, George Lee, came as he was a fullback to play football. The next year, a mile relay team came from Dayton. 3 of them came from Dayton Roosevelt High School, and the other one came from another Dayton school.
And of course, Don Daly, who had played football here and coached, was teaching up there then, was very instrumental.
He was teaching at Dayton Roosevelt, and he was an assistant football coach for another Eastern graduate who was the football coach at Dayton Roosevelt. But Don was also the track coach. And when he came down here to be an assistant football coach, he brought this mile relay team with him. Jack Jackson, Bob Scott, Ben,
we're showing a senior moment here.
Well, here, I knew I was going to do this, so I wrote it down. Ben Price.
Ben Price.
And then another one, Irvin Lewis. 3 of them are still here, or up with us. Irvin Lewis died, but I'm convinced that that mile relay team had a great deal to do with the really acceptance on Eastern's campus of African American students and athletes, because they not only were good athletes, but they were pretty good students.
They were very good.
Jack was an excellent student.
Yeah, I had several classes with Jack.
Jack not only was a good student here in the history department, but when he did his master's at Austin P, he did it with a man that I went to graduate school at Vanderbilt with. I knew about how well he was doing there, and Jack's been amazing. He was not only like the alumnus of the year here, but he was also at Austin P, which is incredible.
Both institutions, of course. Jack's made a very fine mark as a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
But now, as the 60s roll past and we get into the 70s, we had, with the guidance of Eric Abercrombie, a student then, who's now, I guess Eric's still on the faculty at the University of Cincinnati.
He's an administrator, kind of a dean
at UC. But the Gospel Ensemble was a remarkable organization.
They were great, actually.
And when you look at as this institution grew its African American enrollment, I don't think there was a more powerful set of ambassadors for EKU than the University Ensemble. They used to sing in churches. Every Sunday they were singing in a church somewhere in Kentucky, and the accolades for that group were remarkable.
My wife and I and our 2 sons traveled with them to a lot of those churches. They were an amazing group of people, and they were really, they were an incredible group. They were, every one of the University Ensemble members, except one, were African American. There was one Caucasian girl in the choir, but they were really great. On the anniversary of Martin Luther King's death, we had a special program one time in Hiram Brock Auditorium for Martin Luther King, and the choir, it was the ensemble's program, and Dr. King's father came to speak, and he and I were sitting together on the stage, and when the choir sang as they were on their way out, he told me, he said, "I never heard a better gospel choir than that choir."